الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد يقول الحافظ الفقيه شيخ الإسلام شمس الدين ابن قيم الجوزية رحمه الله تعالى في كتابه زاد المعاد قال: فصل في هديه صلى الله عليه وسلم في السلام والاستئذان وتشميت العاطس. قال في الصحيحين عنه: إن أفضل الإسلام إطعام الطعام وأن تقرأ السلام على من عرفت ومن لم تعرف. هذه رواية في الصحيحين أن رجلاً سأل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال: أي الإسلام أفضل؟ فقال: تطعم الطعام وتقرأ السلام على من عرفت ومن لم تعرف. إطعام الطعام عام، ليس مخصصاً بإطعام الفقراء أو المساكين، بل قد يدخل في إطعام الطعام ما تطعمه أهلك وولدك ووالديك وأقاربك، وكذلك ما تطعمه أصحابك وأصدقائك وأضيافك على حسب النية. فهذه أشياء من العادات، من العادة بين المسلمين وغير المسلمين أن يقري أحدهم ضيفه وأن يكرم جاره وأن يكرم والديه وأولاده ويطعم زوجه. هذه من العادات، كان العرب يفعلون هذا قبل الإسلام، لكن إذا نوى الإنسان بهذا الفعل طاعة الله سبحانه وتعالى أصبح عبادة. إطعام الطعام عام، يدخل فيه كل من ذكرنا وغيرهم. قال: وتقرئ السلام على من عرفت ومن لم تعرف. فهذان الأمران يفتحان قلوب الناس ويجعل المحبة والود ينتشر بين المسلمين. وقد قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كما في صحيح الإمام مسلم: والذي نفسي بيده لا تدخلون الجنة حتى تؤمنوا ولا تؤمنوا حتى تحابوا أفلا أدلكم على شيء إذا فعلتموه تحاببتم أفشوا السلام بينكم. This chapter is regarding the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam Sunnah in conveying a salam and requesting permission to enter into another person's private area. Likewise, what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say to a person who had sneezed. He mentions here a narration collected by both Bukhari and Muslim that a man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and asked him, what of Islam is most virtuous? What's meant here is those things that people do naturally amongst each other. What of these dealings, or what of these interactions is most virtuous in Islam? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, to feed others and to convey a salam to those whom you know and those whom you do not. So, what's meant here by what of Islam is most virtuous? Obviously, salah is more virtuous than this. Obviously, fasting, the pillars of Islam, there are actions that are more virtuous, but this is a very specific type of virtue. It is relative to what the questioner had in mind. Clearly, we see from the answer here, the response of the Prophet ﷺ, that the questioner is asking about something very specific, and that is people's dealings with each other, people's interactions. What is most virtuous of these interactions? He mentions feeding their stomachs and as well their hearts by conveying as-salam. قال وفيهما أي في البخاري ومسلم إن آدم لما خلقه الله قال له اذهب إلى أولئك النفر من الملائكة فسلم عليهم واستمع ما يجيبونك أو يحيونك فإنها تحيتك وتحية ذريتك فقال السلام عليكم فقالوا السلام عليكم ورحمة الله فزادوه ورحمة الله وفيهما أنه أمر بإفشاء السلام وأنهم يعني من أطاعوا النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في إفشاء السلام وأنهم إذا أفشوا السلام تحابوا وأنهم لا يدخلون الجنة حتى يؤمنوا ولا يؤمنوا حتى يتحابوا وقال الإيمان الإنصاف من نفسك وبذل السلام للعالم والإنفاق من الإقتار. هذه تماما رواية جاءت عن أحد الصحابة في صحيح الإمام البخاري في كتاب الإيمان. فالصحابة رضي الله عنهم كانوا يقولون الإيمان الإنصاف من نفسك وبذل السلام للعالم والإنفاق من الإقتار. يعني هذه من معالم الإيمان العظيمة التي من قام بها دلت هذه على قيام الإيمان في قلبه وأن الإيمان قد ضرب بجذوره إلى أعماق قلب هذا المؤمن. Likewise, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as collected by Bukhari and Muslim, mention that he said sallallahu alaihi wasallam that when Adam alayhi salam was created by Allah, Allah instructed him saying, go to that group of angels over there and convey as-salam to them and listen closely to their response, for indeed their salutation to you shall remain your salutation amongst you and your offspring, meaning this will be what your offspring will salute one another with. And so Adam alayhi salam went to these angels and he said, Assalamu alaikum, and they responded, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So they added on to his salam, wa rahmatullah. Likewise, in both Bukhari and Muslim, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded that people convey as-salam to one another. And he promised that if they do convey as-salam to one another openly, to those who know each other and those who do not know each other. What's meant here are those who are Muslim, as-salam, to initiate as-salam, to say assalamu alaikum, to initiate another person with this specific salutation. This is for Muslims only. We only say assalamu alaikum to Muslims. As for if a person says that is non-Muslim, assalamu alaikum, the response is differed upon amongst the scholars. The opinion of the author, Ibn Al-Qayyim, and also Shaykh al-Islam, and many others, is that a person responds with, wa alaikum as-salam. And we will get into that, inshallah. But what's intended here is that if you know someone is Muslim, that you should say Assalamu alaikum to them, whether you know them or you don't. This is the spirit of the bond of Islam, that our bond of Islam is that I love all of the Muslims, those whom I know and those whom I do not, right? This is the idea of belief and brotherhood in faith and belief. We see this very often. A person will be out, in a supermarket or somewhere where, especially when it's, usually you don't bump into another Muslim there, and they walk by each other like nothing, and they stare at each other. They walk by and stare at each other the whole time. You know what I'm talking about. We've all seen it, right? And if they know that you're Muslim, they'll stare at you. If you're there for 20 minutes, they'll stare at you the whole time. But never will a salam be exchanged. This is highly disappointing. Likewise, if you bump into another person that is Muslim and you do say Assalamu alaikum, it's almost like they're shocked. It's almost like they're taken aback, and maybe you might get a response, ala istihya, alaikum assalam, This is unfortunate and disappointing and unacceptable. We convey as-salam to those whom we know and those whom we do not. النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ذكر في آيات الساعة الصغرى كما عند الإمام أحمد في مسنده من حديث ابن مسعود أن من آيات الله من آيات الساعة الصغرى سلام الخاصة، هكذا قال ابن مسعود، سلام الخاصة. إيش هو سلام الخاصة؟ يعني ألا يسلم المسلم على المسلم إلا إذا كان يعرفه، وأما إذا لا يعرفه، إذا لم يعرفه فإنه لا يسلم عليه وإن علمه مسلما. هذا هو سلام الخاصة، وهذه من آيات الساعة أن المؤمنين يكونون بهذه الصفة. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us to convey to one another as-salam. And he tells us that if we convey as-salam to one another, we will come to love one another. And we will not enter paradise until we believe, and we will not truly believe until we learn to love one another. قال ابن القيم رحمه الله: وقد تضمنت هذه الثلاث الأصول الخير وفروعه. ماذا يقصد بالأصول الثلاثة؟ الأثر السابق: الإيمان، الإنصاف من نفسك، وبذل السلام للعالم، والإنفاق من الإقتار. الإقتار يعني الضيق والفقر، أن الإنسان ينفق وإن كان يخشى الفقر، أو ينفق وهو مزنوق، يعني ينفق مهما كان في يده، وإن كان الذي في يده قليل فإنه يقتسمه بينه وبين الفقراء. وهذا يدل على الإيمان، أن الإنسان مؤمن بأن الله سبحانه وتعالى سيخلف له هذا المال وسيؤتيه خيرا مما أخذ منه، كما وعد الله سبحانه وتعالى: إن يعلم الله في قلوبكم خيرا يؤتكم خيرا مما أخذ منكم ويغفر لكم، يقول الله سبحانه وتعالى. فهذه الخصال الثلاث: الإنصاف من نفسك، وبذل السلام للعالم، والإنفاق من الإقتار. قال: وقد تضمنت هذه الثلاث الأصول الخير وفروعه، فإن الإنصاف يوجب عليه أداء حقوق الله كاملة، وأداء حقوق الناس كذلك، ويعاملهم بما يحب أن يعاملوه به ويدخل فيه إنصافه من نفسه فلا يدعي لها ما ليس لها ولا يخفيها بتدسيه لها بمعاصي الله. هذا فيه إشارة إلى قول الله تعالى: قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها. دساها يعني غمرها في المعاصي وأبعدها عن الله سبحانه وتعالى وأطفأ نورها. Ibn Al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he mentions to us here a statement of one of the companions. This statement is collected by Imam al-Bukhari mu'allaqan rahimahullah ta'ala in the book of Iman, the book of faith of his authentic compilation. He says, Iman, true faith, is having three traits. Now, obviously, faith is to believe in Allah and the angels and the books and the messengers. What's meant here by these three traits are true faith is that these are the fruits of true faith. If a person really believes in Allah and the last day and the books and the angels and so forth, if a person really has this belief truly and it touches his heart and it has its roots sprouting in his heart, then this tree will bear fruits. This faith will manifest itself in a person's actions. What are these traits, these fruits? He says the first trait is that a person is just and fair and in judging himself. What's meant here by fairness is that a person does not judge himself based on his ego. The ego is what we wish we were, or the ego is what we like to show other people. Rather, what's meant here is that a person looks at himself objectively. Objectivity in judging a person's own self, this is where progress comes from. If a person looks at himself and says, no, I'm happy with myself as it is, I don't see that I'm doing anything wrong, I'm fine, this person is very far from the path of redemption. And we see this in our popular culture now, right? Popular culture is, I love myself and I love everything about myself, and anyone who doesn't love everything about me, then, they don't deserve to have me, and, they need to love me for who I am. I don't know exactly what is meant by this, but people do not love one another essentially. They love one another because of each other's actions, right? That's objectivity. That a person is valuable based on their actions. If their actions are upstanding, they become more valuable. And if their actions are bad or harmful, they become less valuable. And they may even become a liability, right? And so a person needs to constantly, objectively view himself. To view oneself with objectivity. I look at myself and I see what needs to be changed. I am honest with myself and I'm not afraid to be honest with myself. This whole, embrace yourself and, love yourself, and these people are unhinged, and these people usually have extremely, extremely, extremely deeply seated personality issues. When you look at their lifestyle, it's all about I love myself, and it's kind of like an overcompensation because they really can't stand themselves. And oftentimes this is why people who tout this can't spend, 10 minutes alone with themselves without having some phone in their face or having some, person sitting there distracting them from who they are. The point here is that a person needs to view himself objectively. If a person looks at himself with objectivity, he will see what needs to be changed and what needs to be worked on. Doesn't mean a person needs to, beat himself down to where, they have no confidence. This is not what's intended. But what is intended is that a person needs to see what needs to be worked on. If you can't sit down with yourself honestly and write a list of, 100 things that you wish you could change or need to work on yourself, there's a problem. There's a serious problem. And, there's this easy cop that people do, this cop-out. It's like, well, I'm not perfect, You hear people say, I'm not perfect, but I am saying. No, I'm not perfect is just glossing over things. And, it's a cheap cop-out. I'm not perfect, That's not saying anything objective about yourself. I'm not perfect means, it's like this feigning of fake humility. That doesn't get us anywhere. What needs to happen is that a person honestly look at himself, and it takes courage. It takes courage, and it takes, honesty and bravery to look at yourself, because who wants to do that? Who wants to look in the mirror and come to terms with the fact that I need a lot of fixing, I need a lot of work, I may not be favorable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a serious thing, and these are demons that we have to exercise. And so the first trait that the companion mentions is viewing oneself with objectivity. The second is conveying a salam to everyone. And what's meant by everyone here is every Muslim, right? A salam is for Muslims. And the third is spending and giving to others in spite of your own hardship. In spite of your own hardship. Ibn Al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he goes on to explain these traits. He says, these three fundamental traits, they essentially contain or entail all of good and everything that comes from good. How is that? He says, as for a person being objective in viewing himself, if a person truly is objective when viewing himself, meaning not biased to himself, naturally the human being always views himself as the victim, always views himself as giving others and not receiving what he's owed. This is the natural state of being, because people are naturally selfish, right? And so usually people will magnify any perceived slight from another person, and they will mitigate anything that they do against another person. Likewise, they will magnify any good that they do for another person in their mind's eye, and they will mitigate good that other people do for them. That's the natural state of the human being. He says, when a person becomes objective and unbiased in viewing himself, this will bring about a person fulfilling the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fully. A person, if they have this trait, they will no longer be of the camp of, I'm just human, I'm not perfect, and Allah will forgive me, and I've done my best. And who of us can honestly say we've done our best? Who? Who amongst us can stand up and say, I am innocent, honestly? None of us is innocent. We're all guilty. None of us is innocent, and none of us has done our best. And that's how we need to feel about it. And we need to work and build on that. He says, and this trait will also carry a person to, and this trait will also cause a person to fulfill other people's rights. Not just the rights of Allah, but the rights of other people as well, because they are unbiased. They are looking at their exchanges with people with objectivity. And a person will start to treat others as he wishes to be treated. And another thing that this trait will bring about in a person is that the person will view himself for what he really is. So he will not claim merits or virtues that do not belong to him. And likewise, a person will not, put out his soul's light with disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If a person is truly objective with himself and unbiased, a person is not going to lay claim to merit that doesn't belong to him, glory that doesn't belong to him. A person sees himself for what he really is, and that will reflect itself in his life and his actions and his speech as true humility. True humility is not what you say. True humility is not how you stand. True humility is how you view yourself. Right? If you view yourself with objectivity, that's what breeds true humility. And again, as people, as human beings, we're very crafty in, praising ourselves in a very slick way, right? Or deflecting blame in a very slick way. You'll hear people when they apologize, if I've done anything wrong, then I apologize for it. But, how is this an apology? If I've done anything wrong, God forbid, And likewise, people deflect as, people will have this fake humility and this fake selflessness, right? And this urge to, put every little thing they do on the internet for everybody to give them a round of applause and a standing ovation. You'll read the caption, feeding homeless people today, Hey, how are you? What's your name? My name. Like they do that when people aren't looking, right? This is cheap and fake, and it cheapens the of a person being a real human being. If you honestly wanted to be good to this person, you wouldn't plaster their face and their picture and their video all over the internet. Hey guys, everybody, this is a poor person. You see this? Homeless, right here. Right? That's not how we treat people that are less fortunate than ourselves. But that goes back to a critical difference between the Muslim and the non-Muslim when it comes to etiquettes and character. Right? There are parallels. There are Muslims that are honest, and there are non-Muslims that are honest, right? But the honesty may appear the same. But what that honesty is rooted in is the key difference between the Muslim and the non-Muslim. The Muslim's etiquettes, character, good dealings is rooted in to his belief and his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I am honest, I feel like when I am treating others well, I am actually simultaneously building a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This, honesty, integrity, whatever it is, bravery, all of these things are hardwired and deeply rooted and grounded in our belief. Contrary to the non-Muslim. Non-Muslim may have, truthfulness and bravery and all of these other things, but these things are rarely rooted in their belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Usually it is rooted in tradition, or it is rooted in business strategy, or it is rooted in whatever it is they're trying to achieve. So oftentimes people will be honest because it's in their favor to be honest. A Muslim is honest because, in spite of whatever transpires here, this is building a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was asked, what is al-birr? What is righteousness, piety? What is it? جاء يسأل عن البر فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم البر حسن الخلق. البر حسن الخلق. He said piety is having good etiquette, good character. This is piety. So our manners and etiquettes are deeply rooted in our beliefs. These are etiquettes that we adorn ourselves with because this is what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this also changes the effects that other people's reactions to our etiquette will have. What do I mean by that? Usually people are honest when it's in their favor, right? Usually people are nice when it's in their favor. It's good to smile, and speak nicely to a customer because that's how we build a customer base. A Muslim, we do these things primarily because it is a type of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Where does the difference really manifest itself? In the person's reaction. So if we receive a positive reaction or not, we still maintain these etiquettes. If it's going to get me a more positive reaction, should I lie? No. We will tell the truth even if it merits a poor reaction. Contrary to those who have the same etiquettes, but these etiquettes are not rooted in their belief system and their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're nice to people only as long as they receive what they're looking for that a person is nice back but if that doesn't work, then they'll do anything to get that desired effect. And this is one of the tribulations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests the Muslims with. He says subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ. الثمرات هنا قال بعض العلماء الثمرات هنا ثمرات الأعمال. يعني أن الإنسان يعمل كثيرا ولا يجد ثمرة لعمله إلا قليلا. فهذا ابتلاء من الله سبحانه وتعالى. هل سيغير في أفعاله أم تبقى أفعاله لأنه يعبد الله سبحانه وتعالى بهذه الأفعال بغض النظر عن الثمرات. جاءت الثمرة أم لم تأتي فإنه يعمل ما أمر الله سبحانه وتعالى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran that He will test the believers with a lack of fruits. What's meant here by a lack of fruits, in one interpretation of this verse, is that a lack of fruits, meaning a lack of desired results for our efforts. Meaning that we will put forth the effort as dictated to us by Allah and His Messenger, but the fruits will not be as plentiful as we would hope. So this is a test. Is a person going to change now his actions to get the desired effects? Or is a person doing those actions based on principle? I am not doing this for the effects. I am doing this out of worship of Allah. And if those desired effects come to fruition, then great. And if they don't, I still have my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a type of test. يقول ابن القيم والمقصود أن إنصافه من نفسه يوجب عليه معرفة ربه ومعرفة نفسه وألا يزاحم بها مالكها ولا يقسم إرادته بين مراد سيده ومرادها. سيده هنا يعني الله سبحانه وتعالى. وهي قسمة ضيزى يعني جائرة مثل قسمة الذين قالوا هذا لله بزعمهم وهذا لشركائنا فما كان لشركائهم فلا يصل إلى الله، وما كان لله فهو يصل إلى شركائهم، ساء ما يحكمون. فلينظر العبد لا يكون من أهل هذه القسمة وهو لا يشعر، فإنه خلق ظلوما جهولا. هذا وصف الله سبحانه وتعالى للإنسان من حيث أصله، من حيث طبع الإنسان، فهو مخلوق جهولا ظلوما، فلا يتتبع ما تملي عليه نفسه، فإن النفس لأمارة بالسوء إلا ما رحم ربي، يقول الله. وكيف يطلب الإنصاف ممن وصفه الظلم والجهل؟ أن تنصف؟ وكيف ينصف الخلق من لم ينصف الخالق؟ كما في الأثر: ابن آدم ما أنصفتني، خلقتك وتعبد غيري، وأرزقك وتشكر سواي. ثم كيف ينصف غيره من لم ينصف نفسه وظلمها أقبح الظلم وهو يظن أنه يكرمها؟ هذه الرواية، هذا الأثر لا يثبت عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. ولنلاحظ أن ابن القيم رحمه الله لم يجزم بثبوته عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم، هذا حديث قدسي لكنه لا يصح. قال: وفي الأثر. هو يستشهد بماذا؟ يستشهد بالمعنى، ليس يعني أن الأثر ضعيف، أنه لا يمكن أن يكون صحيح المعنى، بل هو معناه صحيح لكنه لا يثبت قولا لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. فنجد هذا كثيرا في كتب ابن القيم، كتب شيخه شيخ الإسلام رحمهم الله، وكذلك نجد هذا كثيرا في تفسير ابن كثير رحمه الله. كثير من الناس يظن أن ابن كثير كلما ذكر شيئا في كتابه في تفسير القرآن العظيم أنه صحيح، وأن ابن كثير رحمه الله يتبناه. هذا غير صحيح وغير دقيق، بل قد يذكر ابن كثير رحمه الله تعالى الرواية ولا يريد منها إلا الاستشهاد على معنى في الآية. هذه الرواية عبرت عن هذا المعنى الصحيح فجاء بها، واللبيب من الإشارة يفهم. ليس إراد ابن كثير رحمه الله للرواية يعني أنه يرى صحة هذه الرواية، وقد يورد ابن كثير رحمه الله تعالى الرواية الضعيفة وهو يعلم ضعف هذه الرواية ويقول بضعفها في أمكنة أخرى من كتبه ومؤلفاته، ولكنه يسوق الرواية بالإسناد في الغالب من أجل التنبيه على أن هذا المعنى هو المراد هنا في هذه الآية. فليس يعني أن الحديث ضعيف أنه لا يمكن أن يكون صحيح المعنى، بل قد يكون صحيح المعنى ضعيف الإسناد، وقد ذكرنا هذا فيما سبق. فليس كل كلام صحيح أو كلام صحيح معناه يصلح أن يكون حديث رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. نحن لا نثبت ولا ننسب إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إلا ما صح إسناده، ما علمنا يقينا أو غلبة الظن أن هذا قاله رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم، لئلا نتقول عليه بما لم يقل، وما سوى ذلك ننبه عليه بأنه ضعيف أو فيه ضعف أو إسناده كذا، ولكنه كلام صحيح أو كلام معناه صحيح. فابن القيم رحمه الله يقول: وكيف ينصف الخلق من لم ينصف الخالق، كما في الأثر: ابن آدم ما أنصفتني، خلقتك وتعبد غيري، وأرزقك وتشكر سواي. فهذا لا يثبت قولا للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم، وإنما معناه صحيح. فلذلك قال: وفي الأثر. قال ابن القيم: وبذل السلام يتضمن التواضع، لا يتكبر على أحد، والإنفاق من الإقتار يعني من الضيق لا يصدر إلا عن قوة ثقة بالله وقوة يقين وتوكل ورحمة وزهد وسخاء نفس وتكذيب بوعد من يعده الفقر ويأمره بالفحشاء. يعني الإنسان إذا وجد نفسه في ضيق ووجد غيره محتاج فإنه ينفق ولو كان في هذا الضيق، لأنه مصدق بوعد الله أن الله تعالى يقول: ويربي الصدقات، وأن الله تعالى وعد أن من أنفق أخلفه الله تعالى خيرا، ويصدق ويثق بوعد الله سبحانه وتعالى ويتوكل على الله، ويصدق بمثل وعد الله سبحانه وتعالى: إن يعلم الله في قلوبكم خيرا يؤتكم خيرا مما أخذ منكم ويغفر لكم. فالإنسان الذي ينفق من الإقتار يعني من الضيق، يعني هو في ضيق لكنه ينفق، فهذا لا يتأتى إلا عن مؤمن واثق بالله سبحانه وتعالى، متوكل على الله، ويعلم أن الله سبحانه وتعالى سيخلفه. وإلى هنا نقف إن شاء الله، الله أعلم. صلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين، والحمد لله رب العالمين.